Let's talk about some of the pros and cons of insurers undertaking the repairs. What are some pros that come to mind for you?
Look, I think some of the pros for those people that are, very time poor, I think taking on project management of building repairs can be an incredibly arduous task. So I think having the insurer actually do the repairs can, for some people, actually be a more efficient process. We do have a lot of people come to us and kind of say, well, yes, it has been efficient, but perhaps the quality of that efficiency isn't quite what they would expect. Some other pros are obviously the lifetime repair guarantee. You touched on that previously, and look, the wording in that is subjective to each policy, and the actual terms of that clause can differ. What that actually means is sometimes it says lifetime, whether or not that, as you said, is lifetime of you, the property, the works, or there are some other clauses as well that are more so around a guarantee on repairs. What that guarantee means is entirely subjective to the insurer.
What it can also just be is a lifetime guarantee on another claim. So when you have an issue and you raise it with the insurer, it's like the claims process kind of kicking off again. And they're going to have to try to assess it, work out if they're liable for it. And I just think it's important for people that it's actually not like a Bunnings product, for example, where you have a problem with a Bunnings product, you take it back and they go, thank you, here's your money back. Because they're really interested in that sort of customer service. For insurers, it's very much like another claim all over again. There are some real benefits to it because if there are quality issues and the insurer does actually accept that those were caused by their providers, they are liable to rectify it at that point. All right, some of the pros that come to mind for me is that if you are, for example, someone who doesn't know a builder, or you don't know trades, or you know nothing about how to repair a property, it's quite an overwhelming task. So if you're in that situation where you're like, I don't know any builders, I don't know any trades, well then you wouldn't want to accept a cash settlement because you're then going to have to manage that process, and you do still have to obviously get the repairs done. In a scenario like that, the insurer will at least put you in contact with a builder and they'll undertake those repairs for you, so that can be a real benefit. The other benefit is that when they undertake the repairs, their builder will do a scope of works. It's important to know that often they take 15 minutes to produce, so that they're often highly inaccurate. So if the builder actually undertakes the repairs, they can then be submitting variations through that process. So the insurer can then be going, okay, yes, that should have been included as well. As they progress, they can be doing those additional items. The downside is that you have a situation in which it then goes back to the insurer to accept that, and that can cause some delays in that process. So I think the other one that I would mention is that if it involves structural damage, if you had a really bad leak and it's causing your property to move and it's accepted that there's been some structural movement, a lot of the time the repair methodologies the insurer is proposing are quite superficial at times. So you want to be sure that if it continues to move in the future, you can go back to the insurer and say, look, it's continuing to move. You need to come back out and look at it. So if your property has some kind of structural movement, I think that lifetime guarantee on repairs is quite valuable in that circumstance, assuming the insurer comes to the table when you do go back to them. And the final one would be that when they're undertaking the repairs, it often means that you don't need to necessarily calculate all those other policy benefits up front, because you might be in alternate accommodation and the insurer is likely going to keep, for example, extending that while the repairs are ongoing, because it's largely they're in control of the repairs at that point. If you are cash settling things, a lot of these things need to be tried and worked out up front and calculated so that you can get a fair cash settlement. When the repairs are actually being undertaken by the insurer, you don't necessarily need to do that up front because it'll be worked out as the claim progresses. Cons of potentially doing repairs, or some of the issues that you've seen come up?
I think probably touching on your point before just around natural disasters, when obviously supply is limited and demand is incredibly increased. I think providers do sometimes send out subcontractors. Perhaps it's underskilled people that aren't necessarily certified. It could be backpackers. And they do come into properties and unfortunately do create more issues than they are actually resolving.